Let's try fluttering, guys. My name is Fairy Ace and welcome to Crafting with Ace. In this video I'm going to be teaching you how to hand sew. So the materials needed for today is a scrap piece of fabric. It doesn't really matter what size or style it is. This is one that's big enough to be worked on. You're going to need a spool of thread, particularly in a color that matches or closely matches the fabric that you chose. We're also going to need a needle, making sure that it has an eye. And then it has a nice sharp point, and then it's not too long and not too fat. Because if it's too wide, then it might be too big of a hole in the fabric, and your thread will come out. You're also going to need a pair of fabric scissors, or a pair of regular scissors, and then a seam ripper just in case you want to undo your seams. So the first step is to take your spool of thread, and you're going to unravel it a bit, probably just to the length of your arm. So that way you don't have too much thread or too little thread. You're going to take a pair of scissors and you're going to cut close to where the spool is. Next you're going to take your needle and one end of your thread and you're going to try to weave your thread into the eye of the needle. Sometimes it takes a couple of tries. If you notice that your thread is frayed, you can either take a little bit of water, put your fingers in there and then pinch thread, or you can kind of lick your fingers and pinch the thread. Once you have your thread through the eye of your needle, kind of like so, you're going to take your other piece of thread and you're going to try to line up the two so that way they're as even as you can get them to be, kind of like looking like so, dropping your needle in the process. Once you do that, you're going to take your needle and you're going to try to bring it to the center of where the thread has been folded in half, like so. To tie the knot, you're going to take the two ends of your thread, and you're going to pin them between your forefinger and your thumb of your left hand, so like so. You're going to take it, you're going to wrap it behind your forefinger, pinching it with your middle finger so it doesn't come loose. Then you're going to kind of make like a loop, kind of crossing over on the top first, and then coming behind to where that loop is. Now have it looking like this. To get that knot closer to your ends than your thread and your needle, you're going to pull and kind of push that loop up as you're pulling the thread with the needle down. Now you kind of notice that the knot is kind of closer to these ends than it is to your needle. To do that again, you're just going to move it behind your forefinger, make kind of like a four shape going in front of your thread, then up and through that loop. Now that you have the loop, you're going to grab your needle side and your end side. You're going to push and until you kind of line up where those two, where your previous knot was. If they aren't two lined up evenly, then you can just go a third time. And then you can notice how you have like one of your knots is now double knotted. This is so that way you know for sure that when you do your stitching that your knot is nice and tight so that it won't go through your fabric and make your stitching become undone. Once that's done, you're going to take your fabric. You'll notice how with a lot of fabrics, there's a pattern side, which is like really bright and colorful. On my fabric, it has a bunch of sparkles on it. And then there's a dull side. These sides are called the right and the wrong side. The one with the pattern or the bright colors is the right side of the fabric, while the dull side is the wrong side of the fabric. So these are the terms I'm going to be referring to when doing our stitches. You're going to take your needle and you're going to come up from the wrong side of the fabric, having your needle go up through the right side of the fabric. You're going to pull until you can't anymore where your knot is. The first stitch that we're going to be doing is a basic threading stitch. You're going to take your needle, and then from where you had your thread come up, you're just going to go a little bit of a way, probably about 1/4 of an inch, and you're going to push your needle down through the fabric, making sure that you pull your thread nice and snug through so that it looks like that. The next step is that you're going to come up kind of like about the same, 1/4 of an inch away from where you came down. If you see that like you're a bit too far, so like let's say if I come up all the way here, don't pull your needle all the way through. If you do, then that means that's how far your stitch is going to be. So you always want to make sure before you pull your stitch all the way through that it's at a spot where you want it to be. If it's not, then you can just keep poking your thread, the needle, up, right and through. Once you find a good spot, that's when you pull your needle all the way through. And then you just keep repeating those motions, going up and down. Trying to keep each thing about 1/4 of an inch. Fine if you don't. Mainly because we're just practicing. If you're someone who does have a hard time with doing that, you can always take a pencil and you can always just make dots along the edge of your fabric. And you're just going to keep practicing until either you feel like you're confident enough, or if you want to switch colors, or you get to the edge of the fabric, or you have about 2 inches left on thread on your needle. When you do get to the edge of your fabric or you're running out of thread, like I am right here, I'm at the edge of my fabric, you're going to take your needle and you're going to push it down so that way it's on the wrong side of the fabric. If you're already on the wrong side, just keep it on the wrong side. You're going to lie your fabric down flat on the table, and then you're going to lie your thread flat with the needle also flat on the table. You're going to kind of create a loop, and you're going to take your needle and you're going to kind of weave it through that loop. Once doing so, you're going to tug on the thread with your needle while holding the other thread that's still on the table. This helps to make sure that when you tie your knot, it stays close to the fabric, so that way you don't have a really long tail until it gets to the knot, because if that happens, then that can make your stitching pretty loose. Double knot, you're just going to do the same thing, lying your thread on the table, looping your needle through, holding onto that loop while gently tugging with your needle, and then you have a double knot. You're going to take your scissors and you're going to try to cut close enough to the knot, but not to the knot itself. So that way you only have a little bit of a tail. So. And then you can notice how it looks on your top. And then how it looks on your bottom or on the wrong side. When doing actual stitches, it's always best to always kind of come a little bit in from the edge. That little bit is called your seam allowance. And it's really useful when you start to hand sew pieces of fabric together. Any of the little bit of extra thread that you had left on your needle, you take it off and you can just discard it because you aren't going to really need it anymore. Then you're just going to cut yourself another piece of thread. Once again, taking one end and running it through the eye of the needle, bringing the two thread pieces ends together, making sure they're nice and even. looping around the back of the finger to create a loop. Making sure that there's a loop. Pushing the loop part, we're also pulling the side with the needle down. We're going to make sure that it gets close to the two ends of the thread. Doing that once again to create a double knot. Now you have your piece of thread that's been folded in half with your needle in the middle and a nice knot at the end. The next stitch that we're going to be doing is called a whip stitch. You're going to start the same way like you did for the running stitch. You're going to come up from the wrong side of the fabric. And you're going to pull it all the way through so that way your knot catches to the edge of the fabric. But instead of going down like we did for the running stitch, we're going to go to the edge and we're going to come up again. And you're just going to kind of keep doing that. You're going to always come up from the wrong side of the fabric to create what looks like these little hoops. The reason why this one is called a whip stitch is because you're kind of whipping the thread around the edge of the fabric. Whip stitch is better for when putting two pieces together and it has like two edges. If you're trying to do something, trying to sew like a piece on top of each other, like putting like a little pocket here, the running stitch would be better to do. And then you just kind of keep practicing. You can go around all the edges, or you can just stop when you're ready. Whip stitch can also be used as a decorative stitch. So if you already have your pieces sewn together and you just want to have like a cute little edging, now the difference between ending a running stitch and a whip stitch is that you'll notice how, because we're always going up from the wrong side, when you get to the end of your thread or your end of your fabric, it's going to be poking through the right side of the fabric. All you got to do is just take your needle, kind of go close to your last stitch, poke it down, so that way your needle is on the wrong side of the fabric. Once again, you're going to lie your fabric flat, make a loop, poking your needle through that loop, pulling your needle and thread while pulling the loop, so that way your knot is very close to the wrong side of your fabric. And then do that again to create that double cut. And then just put your needle and excess thread to the side. And then now you have a stitch. And then you can also show off your running stitch. And I'll be doing it for this video. If you have any questions, make sure to leave it in a comment. If you like this video, just make sure you slap that like button and then subscribe.